Today or yesterday, depending on where you are in the world, the Overwatch League published a post outlining disciplinary action they were taking against 4 people associated with the Overwatch League. There was Taimu, the Finnish DPS player for the Dallas Fuel, who was fined $1,000 for what was described as anti-gay slurs on his personal stream. There was Tai Rong, coach of the Houston Outlaws, who was warned for offensive meme, and this was with regard to a nuclear bomb in Japan and the United States in World War II. There was Silk Thread, the DPS player a DPS player for the Los Angeles Valiant, and he was fined $1,000 for account sharing. And then there was finally XQC, the Canadian tank player of the Dallas Fuel, who was suspended for 4 matches, fined $4,000 for using an emote in a, this is all going to be their quote, racially disparaging manner on the league stream and social media, and using disparaging language against Overwatch League casters and fellow players on social media and his personal stream. And I'll have links to all this stuff in the description box below if you want to see what was actually said. Now, in the case of XQC, they do point out that he has been previously warned, fined, and suspended for similar types of behavior. Now, there's then a quote by Blizzard that says, and this is going to be crucial, "It is unacceptable for members of the Overwatch League to use or distribute hateful, racist, or discriminatory speech or memes. It is important for all members to be aware of the impact of their speech may have on others." Right. In this video, I'm only going to address the XQC issue, where he used this emote in a manner that they described as racially disparaging on the league stream. I'm not going to address the other topics. So, firstly, let's take personality out of the equation, because that's going to be a key component to talking about this issue, and especially in terms of XQC, because this is someone who said something that perhaps you or I don't like, and perhaps you or I have feelings about the person where we like or don't like them, but that's not really relevant. It's not who said it, and it's not what we feel about them as a person. It's what they said in the context of what they said that should be key here, especially when we're talking about should there be punishment or action taken that can inhibit or infringe upon or damage this guy's career. So this isn't about liking or disliking XQC. It's not that I like XQC and I've decided to defend him in a video. It's actually not even about XQC when you boil it down to the essential issues. The point is, this behavior should be judged equally, uniformly, and in a fair manner, no matter who it is engaging in this behavior. Whether they're the most loved person of a particular skin color, or whether it's XQC and you dislike him perhaps, and he's of another skin color, and then you're judging in that context. Now, certainly, his past behavior, as Blizzard quite rightly referenced, and in similar context or along similar vein, should be taken into account when you talk about like his punishment, the context of what he's doing in this behavior. Yes, that certainly is the case. And the fact that he's done silly things in the past that either went close to the line or crossed the line, depending on who you are, is something I think should probably be considered in. You can't treat it as though he's just a random person you've never heard from before and can't have any judgment about from before. I actually do think past experience is important to providing context, and before you know more about the details, you will initially, quite rightly, judge someone accordingly before you know more about the case. Doesn't mean you should leave that as the case, though, and never kind of revisit it or reopen it or add additional information and perhaps change your mind. So, the fact that he has done things that make him seem like an arsehole or has been a bit of an idiot shouldn't really come into the outcome of this particular case and whether or not he should be fined or suspended. Now then, XQC used the TriHard emote, writing TriHard 7, which makes the TriHard emote, and then a 7 afterwards, when Malik Forte, who I think's alias is actually Malik 4Plays, like there's a twist on it there, who I know from the Bleacher Report when he was doing a feature there, I forget the name of the show actually, but it was one that covered esports and it used to reference E-League, and at the time I worked with E-League for Turner, and Turner were working with Bleacher Report, and it was all kind of interconnected, so therefore I know about him already. And he's in fact been on E-League, I think for the Street Fighter games. I'm not sure which fighting game because I don't follow the fighting games. It wasn't for Counter-Strike though. So he's obviously working with the Overwatch League, doing stage hosting, and when he appeared on the stream, this is all in the description box below, there is a screenshot of XQC in the chat of the Twitch chat saying TriHard 7. Now, XQC himself has later claimed, based on what I've seen, I saw a bit of his stream about this and I saw some of his Reddit comments, so I'm hoping this is accurate. Later claimed he didn't mean this as any sort of racist connotation. In fact, he didn't even necessarily mean it in connection with Malik. I think he claimed that it was just coincidence that he said it when he appeared on stream, or that he says it when anyone plays on stream, something along those lines. That's his clarification. I believe it's also said that he reached out to Malik afterwards to clarify as much that it wasn't some kind of racist connotation, and that it is also later implied in a different video that he himself, XQC, because he likes to use the TriHard remote a lot and in many other contexts, has actually reached out previously to Trihex, who is the basis of the TriHard emote, the Tempo Storm speedrunner, and that guy was fine with it and he doesn't really care and he doesn't think it's racist, something along those lines. Now, that's not something to justify or attenuate what you think of this case. I'm just giving you some information there, some additional context. Now, first and foremost, let's get to this. Emotes, at least the emotes I've seen on Twitch, I'm not aware of any other emotes, perhaps there are some, are not racist or sexist in themselves. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because, first of all, because there's so much in the media over the last 20 years, but especially in the last few years online, about racism and sexism and labeling people these extreme terms, there are a lot of people who are very scared, very nervous to even mention that someone's black or someone's a woman or someone's anything, except apparently a white male, because they're scared that just to mention that the person's black is somehow sexist, whereas that's not actually discriminatory at all. It's not discriminatory in the sense we're talking about, which is to do it in a negative sense and to do it in some way to be horrible in your behavior or actions to the person. To mention a fact that they are black is not in any way racist at all. Likewise, to mention that someone is a woman is not racist, or sexist rather. Now, you could imply, oh, you're only mentioning it because he's black. Well, no, in that scenario, you're probably mentioning it because they mainly see white people and they happen to see a black person. Therefore, that's an identifier. I think that's probably more reasonable overall. You wouldn't say, oh, that Spanish guy, when it was a show full of Spanish people, would you? No, because that wouldn't actually help you as an identifier. I don't think you would hear people saying that, right? But if a white person appeared on a show full of Spanish people, you might say, oh, you know the white guy on that show? See, that would be entirely reasonable, right? So what we want to first of all point out is that those things on their own are not in anything to worry about. Now, if there's additional context, yeah, we'll take that into mind. Now then, people might think, though, when I say that emotes are not sexist or racist in themselves, that, again, that's some sort of straw man or some sort of obtuse point. But it's actually quite a significant one, the one that I want to start out the video with. Because what I want to make the point about is that we've already got precedent and cases of this in the past where this has happened. And these things have been labelled forever as symbols of racism, sexism, hatred, etc. So those famous example, obviously, is Pepe the Frog, which I remember, I mean, I'm not sure the dates, but off the top of my head, I think literally 10 years ago, I used to go on a basketball forum where they would use all different types of Pepes for the teams that lost, and Pepes for when it felt bad because the team lost, or Pepes that were like mocking teams when you won, etc., and you were kind of trolling them. And this is way before it's like 8 years before Donald Trump and before any of this like alt-right and rise of white supremacy and all this bullshit that people say about now, which they now claim is associated with Pepe the Frog, because they say it is an alt-right symbol. I think the ADL itself, which you'd have to go and look up what that organization is, claim that it's a hate symbol or something like that and categorized it as much, and it is regularly cited on almost every time you see it mentioned in the mainstream media. It will be cited or referenced to being associated with or being a hate symbol in itself. Just a cartoon frog, which for like half a decade or more was used in a non-hateful manner. It had nothing to do with racism, actually. It wasn't even used in the context of race when I saw it. Just because some people have used it with Nazi paraphernalia around it or in a context that was racist. Now, apparently, every use of that symbol is claimed to be a hate symbol and to be only with that interpretation and that intention behind it, on the basis of how it was at one time used, completely irrelevant to the main use of it. Not in specific contexts, but at all times. Thus, anyone who now posts a Pepe, or has in the past, and this can be done retroactively, it can be applied, can now be cited as a racist, or someone who's using hateful symbols and memes, or someone who's in some way associated with the alt-right, or using a tool of the alt-right. This happened, I mean, one of the main reasons it actually happened in mainstream media was because Donald Trump had posted a Pepe, and therefore, I think it was the MAGA Pepe or something, and so people wanted to somehow imply that he is a racist as a result, or associated with the alt-right, or a Nazi, or racist of some particular stripe. Now, as the reason why I'm bringing this up is because if People don't speak out against this, and we're not talking about like you have to take physical action. Just speak your truth. The fact that to me it's not a racist symbol to use the TriHard symbol, and therefore I don't think it's racist at all circumstances to use it if a black person's on screen. Just saying that alone does in some sense buttress against that symbol now becoming something which anytime you use it is racist. Anytime you use it in any context with a black person is racist. That is what will happen to this emote and other emotes if you don't take action against it in terms of verbal action, saying what you actually think and at least providing a counter opinion. Now, I don't want to live in a world where emotes are policed just the same way as languages now, and as usual, certain groups will be allowed to use them, certain other groups will not be allowed to use them. Certain groups will use them as weapons against other groups, but certain other groups will not be allowed to due to policing of emotes and language. So, when I say others won't, okay, yeah, they can still use it. You can still physically go to a keyboard and do it, but they won't in as much as they might have their jobs put in danger. They might have their reputation smeared. This might, like with the Pepe, be forever used as just because enough people have said it's racist and you used it, now people will imply or infer heavily that you are racist and cite back to another post saying that as much to then buttress in the idea that, oh, well, if I've got a reference that says he's racist and I'm going to reference to that and then someone else references to that. And you get into this scenario where they don't even have to say that you're racist for using the symbol. They can just reference what happened and imply, well, if there's all these references, doesn't that say something about them? And therefore we get this scenario where people are created as racist without ever doing anything racist, but just by having sort of an academic chain of referencing. I mean, there's a great term people came up for this called cytogenesis, where when enough shit's on Wikipedia, you can now imply by, oh, look at all these links that the person is whatever you say they are, whether they've done that behavior or not. Now, this all ties back into the Overwatch League case at this point, because the Overwatch League, when they announced this disciplinary action, did not say what the emote was, say the context in which it was used, they just determined that for you, or provide links to evidence of the person saying it, or evidence of what was said, or any of the facts that you would need. All they gave you was some vague facts and their interpretation of it and expect you to just leave it at that. Now, that is a dangerous precedent to set, because first of all, if I saw that and I didn't know the case, maybe I'd think that he was literally using some sort of weird emote that I don't know, that is literally like some really racist symbol, like a man being hung or something outrageously terrible, like trying to literally show an African-American person as a monkey, like some sort of hybrid, some sort of outrageous symbol. Who knows, right? We don't have the facts and the evidence in this case here. So people can actually infer or imply something even worse. And now they don't even need to know the facts. They can now link back to that. Look, what a terrible racist this person is. Now that is outrageous in itself. They don't mention the emote. That is unacceptable to me. Because not only do they not mention the emote, they don't mention the context and why that context is unacceptable and what their judgment criteria and priority of reasoning is. And then they don't mention what the rule is, what the specific punishment to the rule is, how this all relates back. And the reason why that is very worrying is because I've seen with social justice warrior policing of language that this is a classic move that they take. Well, what you do is you purposely make the rules as wide open as possible, as vague as possible, so that at any moment, not only can you reinterpret the rules entirely, but because it's open to all grounds of interpretation, you can just move the goalposts. So suddenly a term can become something else overnight if you want that to be racist or sexist or ist in a different manner. It's a classic tactic, whereas if you put it all down on paper now, the next time something happens, if it's slightly different, it doesn't quite fit your rules, someone can say, but it's look, you've given me the rules, it's not racist. They purposely keep it vague to allow them to pivot at all moments and make anything and everything racist at the drop of a hat and forever, and to retroactively apply it. So that's a very worrying tactic because it is a social justice warrior tactic. It's also a worrying precedent if you're a pro player in the Overwatch League, quite frankly, because you can be fined a considerable portion of your monthly salary for actions which are simply deemed and determined to be unacceptable, but out of nowhere, they weren't a day before, there was no hard rule, there's no set thing, a load of people did it and didn't get punished for it, a lot of people will do it and won't get punished for it, but you get punished with no set precedent or grounds or ruling. And what can you do beyond that? No real appeals process, according to some of the players involved and some of the individuals. This is classic Riot Games behavior in League of Legends, where they're just the judge, jury, executioner. They determine what you did, what the intention was, all the information. Sometimes don't even take on board things you tell them. You don't have a right to appeal to them. And they can just issue you some sort of a fine. They can just take away your salary. They can ban you for games. They can ban you from the league entirely. They can ban your team. They can ban you from owning a team. They can do all these things without any of the due process of the real world. Where in the real world, you can't just just steal someone's business or just fire someone for no good reason and do all these things in a capricious manner. But you can in esports now, and you can in these leagues. And listen, I can't stop them from doing it, but I can speak out against it. And I hope that people who also feel likewise would go ahead and do as much. So now let's talk about emotes, shall we? Not just your XQC, but emotes. So if we're going to make it so that emotes can be considered just racist, and there's a racist context that's always racist, well, then by that logic, Overwatch League and anyone else, Twch themselves, now need to go back through all the logs in those chat replays, and they need to go back through all these logs like some sort of an esports Stasi from East Germany during the Soviet period, and find every example of anyone ever saying TriHard or Kamumbra or Mingli or whatever else could be considered racist. Get every emote ever used, check who is on screen while they're saying it. Now, if it's a black person on screen while they're saying TriHard, presumably they have to ban or punish the person who said that, even if it's in the past. Oh, but wait a minute. I forgot about that. Yeah, what about the real world double standard on black slurs, where we all know there's very rarely ever punishment for black people themselves using the exact same slur, even if it's literally the same slur and in the same context. So do we have to now apply that digitally to be sensitive to black people? So should we digitally enforce or uphold that double standard? And every time we find someone say TriHard and there's a black person on screen, do we have to now check the race of that account and the person behind the account before we ban or punish them in any way? Likewise, in the Overwatch League, are you allowed to say TriHard when Malik is on screen if you are not white? Okay, what about if you're Mexican? What about if you're Chinese? What, is it only if you're black you're allowed to? What are the rules here is the point I'm making here. It's madness, right? Now then, in this scenario, which by the way, that's obviously a facetious example. Like you couldn't do that approach, or at least I hope you couldn't, for fuck's sake. Maybe some AI could do it. Now, either remove all emotes of anything animate, or this issue will continue to come up again and again, and it won't ever end. And the reason why I'm telling you that is you'll think, nah, it's just in this case because, you know, and by the way, I agree with you. I'm sure a lot of the people there were in a kind of cheeky, edgy way, actually implying some sort of very, very, very vague racial connotation, or like, he's black, haha, therefore I put the black emote. Okay, I could see that for some of them. Definitely not saying all of them, but some of them, I have to figure with all the thousands of people that must have done it over the time. Yeah, there's got to be some people. Now, in that scenario where they do that, yeah, that's not that ridiculous to say, maybe there's something there. Still hard to punish and hard to prove who did it and hard to read the intention. But as you keep going, if you allow anything animate, this will happen. So let's say we remove all humans, right? Because if you just remove the black people, now people can still say the same thing Ming Li when an H person appears. Same exact thing, right? So we've got to remove all the people. Oh, fucking all right. Removed all the people. Right, now we're all fine to use Twch emotes again. What's that? Someone's using an emote of a Winston or a monkey for a black person. What do you think they're going to say now? Oh, it's obviously the same racism again, right? Better remove those again. Oh, what's that? They're using a dog. Or they're using some sort of piece of fruit. Well, that'll be racist again then. Got to remove that then. Got to remove everything animate that could ever exist and be a creature so that no comparison can ever be made. It'll never end, literally. And by the way, that's not a straw man. Because these are the same arguments, which is that someone thinks up an offensive context for something, they decide the other person's intention in using that thing that they've now decided a context for, and you then use the fact that you're now saying it's clearly racist or sexist or whatever, discriminatory, as the foundation to say now we must need punishment X or behavior Y to be taken against this person. So let's get into this aspect of emote, shall we? Because people who say that it's clear or obvious that they know the context of what's happening entirely, to me, you are just a social justice warrior. You might not think of yourself as it, but your behavior, your mentality betrays a social justice warrior's pattern of behavior. Because a social justice warrior is here to explain to the rest of us how we must behave and be policed, not to come and make valid points and argue the basis of the points and the merits of the points, or to defend their points against other points. They're here to just issue commands. This is racist, that's it. To label and then to decide the punishments and to try and enforce those punishments. There's never room with the social justice warrior mentality for interpretation or the intention behind it or context that's actually accidental sometimes. If a bad intention can be thought up, then it is applied, and therefore the person did that thing, and there's no room for that person. Funnily enough, there's interpretation when it comes to how you're offended, but not with what the person says, apparently. That's what they do. So here's the first thing to say about that emote, the TriHard emote. We can't know why people use that emote. I can't claim to read their minds to know how everyone who uses that emote uses that emote. So you know what? Sometimes there might be literal coincidences. Someone was using it a second before someone appeared, pressed enter, and the person appeared on screen. Now that person might not even have intended to use TriHard when a black person appeared on screen, but they have. So are they just as guilty? Do we not take their intention into account or the context? Of course we should, right? What about someone who, like XQC, claims to use it all the time in another context and has even talked to the person behind the emote and thinks, oh, it's not racist, and now uses it? It's funny, people love context when it's about how they're offended and how something's wrong, but they don't like context when it's like that, do they? Like it's something that actually might explain away why something's not as outrageous as they say it is. Now let's consider the standard assumed context. Because, by the way, I already gave you a great one before. What happens if it turns out it's a black person using it? Is that not okay now? Are they now not allowed themselves to say, haha, try hard, but mean it in the try hard salute manner towards a black person because someone else could mean that in a racist manner? No, that's ridiculous, right? We don't know who's behind all these things. We do know who XQC is, but not all the other ones, which again is the point of whether the memes and the emotes can be racist or sexist. So, now let's consider what is the standard assumed context of people using this emote, okay? Now, TriHard himself says it's, it's a salute. It's like people use it for like, haha, oh my God, I can't believe that's happening. Or like, it's so cringy. He himself has his own interpretation. But you know what? That's his interpretation. I'm going to assume that a lot of people using it use the TriHard emote, or come on, bro, when they see a black person. I'm going to assume when an Asian person comes up, they use the Ming Lee one. And so, you know what? This is actually one reason, by the way, why I personally think emotes are pretty shit. Because I actually don't think they're language. I don't think they serve the purpose of language. Like, they aren't hieroglyphs for anyone who's tried to tie that link in there. Hieroglyphs were a type of language. It's a pictorial language. Now, in this scenario, for me, emotes have always been more about conveying a feeling. So it's what is a feeling, right? It's not very pinned down. It's a vague, it's an abstract timbre of the soul. Like, it's, oh, PogChamp, oh, that's amazing. They're not really saying like, this is an amazing thing and I always only sit, no, it's just a feeling, right? So in that scenario, it's hard to really know what their feeling is when they're saying it in a manner that does seem to somehow have a sort of racial connotation, but what is their feeling towards that? I mean, it's hard to know, right? Especially when the emote itself has a meaning beyond the color or class of the person in the emote. It's not only for black people, is it? That's the problem. It has another meaning. So can you not use the other meaning because someone else uses it just for that? This is what identitarian politics does. It reduces everyone to only their sex or their race or their social economic background or their power in society and doesn't allow them to have any other meaning. It enforces a label, and that's all you can ever be, is that label and its connotations. You can't ever be a person who's diverse and has all sorts of different opinions and thoughts and intentions and meanings and different feelings from moment to moment. You will not be allowed that. The destruction of the individual and the creation of the collectivist class is the entire goal and thinking behind the creation of this type of behavior. So, let's think about this. When you're in that scenario, as I said, personally, I think emotes are pretty shit in that sense. So I assume when you make an emote, yeah, you're hoping people kind of know, oh, this is how I'm feeling in this moment. So here's the question. Is it racist to use the TriHard emote when someone black is on screen? Now, there's an incident that people have tied to this that Richard actually brought up on Twitter, Richard Lewis, which was the TerenceM incident when he was playing in a DreamHack tournament in Hearthstone, where people were not just using the TriHard emote, they were also saying some outrageous things that were like clearly racist, really terrible. I'm talking about words that were just like that, like literal slurs, using like terminology that and how would you say it? Characterizations of the person that were just had nothing to do with the game, had nothing to do with him as a person. They were just about his race and derogatory things about his race. That's entirely different. That's not about the TriHard in this case. We're talking about people literally just saying fucking TriHard. So, does it depend if you are black or if you know the person in question or you are their friend as to whether you say TriHard? Who the fuck knows, right? There's no set rules for this. It's way too vague. We can't really know what the intention is or whether someone's intention is racist because all they're doing is putting a fucking little image. They're not giving us any more info aside from that. So, you know what? I would assume some of them are racist. If I had to guess, how many of them are real racist and trying to make a really racist statement? Probably a very small amount. How many of them are maybe being cheeky, a bit bawdy and a little too edgy with their joke and implying or at least hinting at a racist one? Okay, yeah, maybe some again. Not sure how much, but okay, probably a decent amount. Is it everyone? No, I don't think that's probably reasonable. So the key point to make here is... Oh, by the way, I forgot to add one more thing. So should we, as a result, ban this emote? Should we block anyone using it when a black person's on screen? No, because it has other meanings again. It's not just about the colour of the person in the fucking emote. The people keep saying that to kind of show how their worldview is that you can only be black, or you can only be white, you can only be Chinese. You can't mean or be anything else or represent anything else. Now, it's also worth pointing out in the XQC example, and a lot of the incidents I saw of when people used it for Malik, is that they're not using just a TriHard and say, haha, black person. They're using the TriHard in a 7. Now, as far as I know, 7's like that. It's like a salute. It's like salute. So it's the TriHard, it's the cringy, it's the face, and then it's a salute as well. They're conveying all sorts that has fuck all to do with your race. Now, are they doing it at the same time as that person? I don't know if they use it other times. I don't know if they use it for other people. It's hard to get into this sort of shit, right? In terms of XQ, we actually know he does use it for other people who aren't black. So, funnily enough, he actually has a pretty compelling case in that scenario. It's not about racism. So, again, it's not as simple as, well, we all know the context and we all know what it means if you use a black emote when a black person comes on screen and you're not black. No, we don't all know that, mate. You're telling us we all know that, and there's only one way we can interpret it, and you've decided how that something's racist, and we must now all interpret it as such and therefore follow your prescribed behaviour, which is very key. They always prescribe behaviour. This person should be banned, they should never be allowed in, they're the worst person, we should all shun them. No, someone like I don't say that even the people who are saying this is racist should be like banned from the fucking community, or that they're all terrible people. No, they're arseholes maybe, or they're going a bit too far and being judgmental, sure. Or in some cases, the arsehole justice warriors be doing terrible stuff. But yeah, that's about it. I allow freedom of speech, believe it or not. Now, what was that I was going to get back to? Yes, right. So a key point to make here is, because I've outlined, some of the people might be racist or might be using a mildly racist interpretation or just being mean and using race as the topic in that sense, which is a very underrated aspect of why I think people online actually use racist language and terminology. It's not necessarily purely for racist reasons. I think they actually use it just to hurt the other person's feelings. But the point I want to get into here is, if I was a black talent who was on camera, or I had a friend who's a black talent on camera, or pro player who's on camera who's black, and I saw people doing this, you know what? I might be bummed out, either for myself if I was black, or for the person in question. I might be irritated. I might even feel like it's insulting to me or to my friend or the person on screen or whatever. But you know what? That's very different from me being a victim of racism and the people who did that needing to be seriously punished. This is a key point to make, because it's something that always gets missed in these conversations about offensive behaviour. And it goes like this. It's actually fine to be offensive. Now, it's not fine to be racist and offensive in your behaviour. It's fine to be offensive. I know at the moment they're making all these laws that's going to make it not fine to insult people or to be offensive, but insulting or offending people is not the exact same and overlaps perfectly with being racist. It's not illegal either. It might be considered mean, you might look down on it, you might say, what an arsehole, but it's not the same as some terrible thing like racism that we must instantly combat. No. There's a lots of contexts in which it's perfectly fine and sometimes necessary to be insulting and rude and offensive to people. There absolutely are. Anyone who says there isn't, funnily enough, is a hypocrite, because they almost always then use that sort of language, offensive, insulting, rude behaviour, towards people they consider offensive, rude, insulting, racist, sexist, etc. Funny, they have a context in which they're allowed to do it and it's necessitated and acceptable and even perhaps to be encouraged and praised, but there's no other context for anyone else, is there? Funny how that works, isn't it? Now, if one of these people in question wants to ask people to stop or say it hurts their feelings or could you guys not do it anymore? Okay, you know what? That's fine. That's absolutely... I even think it might actually have a small impact on the community. I don't think it'd have a lot. I don't think many people would even hear it or they'd even care. But it might have a small impact. By the way, it's probably generally a good approach as well. Rather than saying this is racist, show that, hey, that actually I'm interpreting this as racist and it's hurt my feelings. That's actually a pretty good way to get through to people. They'll have empathy for you, or they'll sympathise with your position, or they'll realise they hurt someone and maybe behave differently. That's actually a very good way to attenuate other people's behaviour, I've found, is to kind of open up to them, connect with them as a person and communicate information about how they're making you feel. Now, whether or not that makes the thing racist is completely irrelevant, but you might actually be able to stop the behaviour if that is indeed what you're hoping to do. Now then, that is very different from telling people that how you feel is primary to anything else, including their intention, that you know their intentions, and that, or that you don't care about their intentions, and then demanding certain prescribed behaviours or punishments. That's very different, and that's a very negative type of behaviour in and of itself, in isolation and in this context, regardless of what the other person did. In the same way as making a mob to go and kill someone who you found out did a horrible crime is not acceptable either. It doesn't matter that they did a horrible crime, you're not allowed to go and do that. Now then, let's point out something which is always pointed out in favour of why everyone's a racist who says something, but never in defence of it. So they always say, language is changing. So if you can find an old term that wasn't racist, and they say, but in the modern day, that's racist. Yeah, you know what? Language is always changing. But funny, in this scenario, it's only ever changing until people get offended. Then it's set in stone forever that's always offensive and can always be applied like that. No, language is always changing, so it can be offensive one day. 10 years from now, it might not be offensive. Might be offensive again 10 years from now. That's perfectly understandable. There is no one set definition forever. It's how people use it. Yeah, I agree with that. But that also means you have to be open to the idea it can change again. You can't enforce that forever. Now, there's a straw man people will throw out, and have already, which is that they say, so you're saying that all racist shit that's said, or something else racist is somehow not racist because TriHard isn't. Like, they'll say, for example, I saw someone saying, TriHard, get these spear chuckers out of here, or this TriHard steals everything. Well, in that scenario, they're not just saying TriHard, are they? They've added something racist to it, an explicitly racist context. And so that doesn't even really apply to this scenario. It's not in any way relevant. It's not the same. There's no equivalency between them. Not only that, they've even done you a favour of, unlike that vague, nebulous, just use of emote I talked about before, we can't really know what it means. They've done you the favour of telling you what they intend and what they're actually trying to say in this scenario. Even if they're just jokes, they're not leaving much for interpretation, right? This is like, if someone throws a banana at soccer players, well, they're doing that with a very clear intention. They didn't just happen to have a banana that they sometimes throw at other people. No, that doesn't happen. That is an absolute straw man and a really disingenuous example, because people don't throw bananas at other players in a non-racist context, do they? Doesn't happen. Whereas we know people use TriHard for white people in a totally different sense that doesn't mean anything to do with racism. So that analogy doesn't work on any grounds, does it? So if people say racist stuff and TriHard, then the racist stuff they say is what's racist in the context, not the TriHard, right? They can use the TriHard as part of it and make it part of a racist context. That's not what was going on there. People are just saying TriHard. In fact, they're doing the salute. They're not even just doing TriHard. They're trying to communicate something else as well, right? What is the implication of that? They're all mega racists who are saying, salute to black people who apparently they dislike in some way. No, that doesn't seem like a reasonable interpretation of people saying TriHard 7. So, to summarize again, insulting and offensive behaviour is not illegal or any kind of sexist, racist, transphobist, transgenderist, I guess they'd say in that scenario. Doesn't matter, by the way, if the talent of the player or people in general agree. I mean, the TriHard guy, as I'll link below, apparently does agree, but you know what? He doesn't get to decide our intention or what something generally means. He can contribute to it and give his own opinion that might sway yours. Cool, that's fine. Intention and context are important. In this scenario, and in many scenarios, immediately before you know any context and more information, give people the benefit of the doubt. You don't know yet. You don't know a whole lot. The people who don't do that are exactly the SJW types. They want to tell you what you mean. They don't want to hear your justifications or your reasons or your explanations. There's a classic saying from Friedrich Nietzsche, the great philosopher, that I love in these scenarios, because it's really telling of the people that are really going ham on these sorts of things. And it's not just about the fact that they're offended at racism. They want to punish someone. It's this saying that said, distrust all in whom the impulse to punish is strong. Because the reason why is that belies something else in their character or what they're trying to accomplish with their own agenda that has nothing to do with this particular case. This case is just the tool that they're using to bash the other person with. So one of the reasons why I always speak up about all these free speech issues, and by the way, I've done it when it was a Brazilian guy who was not white, talking to someone who was a white kid. I've done it in a scenario where it was someone who was someone saying something to gay people. I've done it when people who were gay were saying stuff to people who were straight people. In this scenario, the reason why I always bring up, first reason, it's just unfair. It's unfair behavior to decide you know what someone means, to get the most unfavorable interpretation, not listen to anything they have to say, tell everyone stuff like, everyone knows this, and, this has to be done this way. Use strawman arguments of, but look at this much worse racism. That's the same, and it's a slippery slope. No, it isn't in any way. And to use all these scenarios, it's really unfair. Now, beyond it just being unfair, it can have a big impact on people's careers and characters. As I said, it can be referenced again and again. And if people decide it's racist, it can now be linked back to prove that they are racist and build up a corroborative evidence bank that says that they're a terrible person. Then you've got to add in, these aren't, in this particular incident, just someone saying, TriHard 7. It's not a particularly serious issue, actually. These aren't terrible cases of racism that are so bad and enforcing slavery and ridiculous things in people's jobs and lives. They aren't really. Now, as usual, the idea that you can't be offensive and insulting, I'll just boil that down to this. Adults can be offensive and insulting to each other. Now, would adults be offensive and insulting to a child? No, probably wouldn't be very reasonable, right? What do children have to do with an Overwatch League stream? What do children have to do with grown-up discussion between adults on the internet? As soon as people make it about kids, you're influencing kids, man. Oh, you know what? What about the kids who see you and do this? What about a kid who saw that and he was in that chat? It's not about kids. Kids have no place in this matter. It's not nothing to do with them. That's like taking the old classic saying, which says like censorship is telling, I think it was censorship, is telling an adult he can't have steak because a baby can't chew. That's exactly it. The rest of us can be offensive and insulting as much as we want. Now, we can't cross the line into racism and other isms. Yeah, that's actually quite reasonable to say. But don't then conflate the two and decide that they have. Now, I will just say finally, XQC has his own context here. He has his past history doing stupid shit, which doesn't put him in good stead, and has essentially drained his sort of moral credit bank account where people are going to think you're an unethical or immoral person. Okay, in this case, it doesn't seem like he did a whole lot wrong, but he set a bad precedent for himself. Now, that's not entirely irrelevant, but it's also not wholly relevant to this issue and the use of the emote overall. This video was supported by Dean Tanglis, Michael Allaire, Andreas Westerlund, Alex Adams, Gman, Twch, Jerky's Minion, Anthony, TGreb, Jake Petrucci, Yordan Tsenkov, Daniel Yordanov. Want to get exclusive teasers for my upcoming work? Submit questions for me or make suggestions for my content? Become a part of the ever-growing Scrilluminati via Patreon link in the description box below.